They laughed. Not loudly, but enough. A group of young Marines stood on the runway, confident, fresh, undefeated by time. Then they saw him. An old man with silver hair, slow steps, and a flight suit that looked older than all of them combined. Someone joked, "Hey, Grandpa, you still remember how to turn it on?" The A-10 sat silent behind him. Cold steel, legendary, feared. The old veteran stopped. For a moment, the air felt heavier. He slowly turned his head, eyes sharp, not offended, disappointed. This wasn't anger. This was memory. Combat memory. The kind you never forget. He climbed into the cockpit. Switches flipped. Systems hummed. The aircraft came alive, like a sleeping beast awakened. And suddenly, no one was laughing, because they realized something too late. Legends don't retire. They just wait for someone to doubt them. The sun was sinking low over the desert airbase, painting the runway in gold and amber. The kind of sunset that made everything look peaceful, even machines built for war. A group of young Marines stood near the tarmac, helmets off, uniforms crisp, confidence written all over their posture. They were the future. Fast, sharp, trained on simulators more advanced than anything before them. To them, this was just another demonstration day. Then the old veteran walked out. His steps were slower than theirs, measured, deliberate. His flight suit was faded, the patches worn thin by decades of use. Some of the Marines exchanged glances. One of them smirked. "That's him," someone whispered. "No way," another muttered. "He flew this thing." Behind the old man sat the A-10 Thunderbolt II, ugly by modern standards. Thick wings, massive engines, a flying gun, a relic. At least that's what they thought. One Marine, barely 22, let the joke slip out loud. "Hey, Grandpa," he said with a grin, "you still remember how to turn it on?" A few chuckles followed. The veteran stopped walking. Not abruptly, not angrily, just stopped. The air changed. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the line of Marines. There was no rage in them, no embarrassment, only something deeper. Experience, loss, survival. "I remember," he said calmly, his voice low and steady, "how to bring everyone home." The laughter died instantly. Without another word, he climbed the ladder into the cockpit. Every movement was muscle memory, unchanged by time. The Marines watched more closely now. No phones, no jokes. Inside the cockpit, the veteran's hands hovered for a moment. Not because he forgot, but because he remembered too much. Friends, missions, smoke, fire, screams over the radio. Then his fingers moved, switch by switch. Click, whir, hum. The A-10 began to wake up. Lights flickered across the dashboard. Systems came online. The deep growl of the engines rolled across the runway, vibrating through boots and bones alike. The Marines felt it in their chests. The old man's posture changed. He wasn't old anymore. He was a pilot, a weapon operator, a protector. The aircraft wasn't metal. It was an extension of him. One Marine swallowed hard. That's not in the manual," he whispered. Outside, heat waves shimmered behind the engines. The ground crew stood frozen. The A-10 was alive. The veteran looked forward through the canopy, eyes locked on a horizon only he could see. "This bird," he said over the intercom, "was built to fly low and stay when others leave." Silence followed. Not a single Marine laughed now, because they finally understood. They weren't watching an old man remember a machine. They were watching a legend remind everyone who he was. The engines settled into a steady roar, deep and controlled, like a predator breathing before the hunt. The A-10 vibrated beneath the old veteran, familiar in a way no modern machine ever could be. Every sound spoke a language he had learned decades ago, one written in fire, fear, and survival. On the runway, the Marines stood differently now. Back straighter, smiles gone. The joke that had slipped earlier felt heavy, embarrassing. They weren't just watching a startup sequence anymore. They were watching mastery. The veteran's voice crackled through the radio again, calm and precise. Hydraulics green. Weapons systems online. Weapons? A few Marines exchanged nervous looks. This wasn't supposed to go this far. This was meant to be a symbolic demonstration, a nostalgia act. The ground officer stepped forward, raising a hand. "Colonel, this is just a—" The veteran lifted 2 fingers gently, not looking away from the instruments. "I know exactly what this is," he said, "and what it isn't." He advanced the throttle slightly. The A-10 rolled forward a few feet, then stopped. Dust kicked up behind the engines, swirling around the boots of the Marines. The sound alone demanded respect. This wasn't speed. This was presence. One of the younger Marines whispered, almost to himself, "My father told me stories about this plane." The veteran heard him. "That's because," he replied, "this plane didn't care how bad things got." He paused, eyes darkening. When radios went silent, when air cover pulled back, when everyone else was gone, this bird stayed. A memory flashed through his mind. A valley choked with smoke. Friendly troops pinned down. Calls for help layered with panic. He remembered flying so low he could see faces on the ground. Faces filled with fear and hope all at once. He remembered ignoring the warnings, the risks, the odds. Because that was the mission. Outside, the Marines were no longer spectators. They were students. One finally spoke up, voice tight with respect. "Sir, how many combat hours?" The veteran smiled faintly. "Enough to know," he said, "that confidence is loud and experience is quiet." He shut the engines down slowly. The sudden silence felt strange, almost too quiet after that roar. The canopy opened with a hiss. The veteran climbed down the ladder, his boots touching the tarmac with a soft thud. He stood there, smaller than the aircraft behind him, but somehow larger than everyone else around. "I don't blame you for joking," he said, looking at the Marines. "You haven't seen what I've seen, and I hope you never do." He looked back at the A-10. "But never mistake age for weakness," he continued. "And never forget who built the path you're walking on." One by one, the Marines snapped to attention. Not because they were ordered to, but because they felt they should. The veteran returned the salute. And for the first time that evening, the sun dipped fully below the horizon, leaving behind something far stronger than laughter. Respect. The Marines remained at attention even after the salute ended. No one spoke. No one moved. The veteran adjusted his flight gloves slowly, as if time itself had eased its grip around him. The airbase lights flickered on one by one, replacing the sunset with a colder, harsher glow. Finally, a senior officer cleared his throat. "Colonel, would you be willing to speak to the unit?" The old veteran looked at the line of young faces. Some were embarrassed, others inspired. A few looked shaken, as if something they believed about strength had just been rewritten. He nodded once. They gathered closer, forming a half-circle near the silent A-10. Up close, the aircraft looked even more intimidating, scarred, heavy, unapologetic, just like the man who had flown it. "I wasn't much older than you," the veteran began, "when I first sat in this cockpit." He tapped the fuselage lightly. "I thought courage meant fearlessness." A faint smile crossed his face, then faded. "I was wrong." The Marines leaned in. "Courage," he continued, "is hearing fear in your own voice and flying anyway. It's knowing someone on the ground is praying you don't turn back." His eyes drifted somewhere far away. "There was a mission," he said quietly. "Bad weather. Enemy fire everywhere. Command told us to disengage." He paused, but our boys were still down there. The Marines felt a knot tighten in their chests. "I circled longer than ordered," he said. "Low. Slow. Every alarm screaming. I could see tracer fire reaching for me like claws." He took a breath. "But I could also see friendly smoke. I could hear their voices. And as long as I could hear them, I wasn't leaving." No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to listen. "One of those soldiers," the veteran went on, "found me years later. Grocery store. Different war. Same handshake." His voice softened. He said, "Sir, I didn't know your name, but I knew your sound." The veteran looked back at the A-10. "That sound," he said, "meant someone stayed." A young Marine finally raised his hand, hesitant. "Sir, were you ever scared?" The veteran met his eyes without hesitation. "Every time," he said. "Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying or dangerous." A few Marines nodded slowly. "Fear keeps you sharp," the veteran continued. "But ego gets you killed. That's why jokes fade fast in places like this." The earlier laughter felt like a lifetime ago. The senior officer stepped forward. With respect, Colonel, do you miss it? The veteran considered the question. I miss the people, he said, not the war. He glanced at the Marines again. You're faster than we were. Smarter with technology. Better equipped, he said honestly. But never forget, machines change. Responsibility doesn't. He straightened his shoulders. When the moment comes, he said, it won't matter how new your gear is. It'll matter who you are when no one's watching. A siren sounded in the distance. Routine, harmless, but it snapped everyone back to the present. The veteran stepped away from the group. Take care of each other, he said. That's how legends are made. As he walked toward the hangar, the Marines watched him go, not as an old man, but as a standard they weren't sure they could ever fully reach. That night, the airbase felt different. The usual noise, engines, radios, boots on concrete, was still there, but something deeper had settled in. A quiet awareness. The Marines moved with more intention now, less swagger, more focus. The old veteran's words echoed in their minds long after he disappeared into the hangar shadows. Later, in the barracks, the jokes didn't return. One Marine sat on his bunk, staring at his helmet. Another cleaned his rifle slower than usual, each movement deliberate. A third replayed the moment in his head. The way the A-10 came alive, the way the colonel's voice never shook. You think we'll be like that someday? One finally asked. No one answered immediately. I don't mean the flying, he added. I mean being that calm. That question lingered. The next morning, training resumed. But the instructors noticed something unusual. Commands were followed faster. Arguments disappeared. When mistakes happened, Marines corrected each other without ego. During a live-fire exercise, one Marine hesitated, then remembered the colonel's words. Confidence is loud. Experience is quiet. He adjusted. He breathed. He executed. Later that day, the senior officer received a message. The colonel had declined a formal ceremony. No speeches, no medals, no spotlight. But he left a note. Teach them why we stayed, not how good we were. The officer read it twice. That afternoon, the Marines gathered once more near the A-10. Not for a demonstration this time, but for maintenance. They cleaned its scarred skin with care, running hands over dents earned decades ago. This thing's older than my dad, one Marine said quietly. Yeah, another replied. But it never quit. As the sun climbed high, one Marine looked up at the cockpit and realized something important. The A-10 wasn't impressive because it was powerful. It was impressive because it was reliable, just like the man who flew it. Weeks passed. The old veteran never returned to the base. But his presence didn't leave. During inspections, the Marines stood a little straighter. During missions, they checked on each other more often. When stress rose, someone always remembered the sound of that engine starting. Slow, heavy, unstoppable. One evening, a new group of recruits arrived. Fresh faces. Same confidence. Same jokes. One of them glanced toward the A-10 and laughed. Why do they keep that old thing around? A Marine from the original group turned to him. No, he said calmly. You don't talk about it like that. The recruit blinked. Why not? The Marine looked toward the runway, then back. Because when things were at their worst, he said, that plane didn't leave. And neither did the man who flew it. The laughter stopped. Far away, the colonel sat on a quiet porch somewhere, hands wrapped around a warm cup, eyes watching the sky. A jet passed overhead, fast, modern, loud. He smiled softly, not because of the aircraft, but because he knew the lesson had landed. Legacy wasn't about flying forever. It was about teaching others how to stand when you're gone. And somewhere on that airbase, a new generation understood. Real power doesn't shout. Real strength doesn't fade. And legends never need to prove themselves twice.